Howdy y'all, Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Today I'm going to be going over my fall and winter garden plan with you guys. Over the past several weeks I have done several seed starting videos, kind of identifying some of the fall and winter crops, that I'm going to be growing. But today I'm going to go over where all of that stuff is going to go. North Texas has a really long growing season in terms of the spring and summer garden. Our last frost date is like the end of March, and then our first frost date is like mid-November. So we have all of that time to grow all of the warm season crops like okra, peppers, tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, melons, pumpkins, those type of things. But because North Texas also has mild winters, that means that we can grow food basically year-round with just a little bit of frost protection. So like I was mentioning at the beginning of this video, I have done several videos over the last few weeks talking about the varieties that I have started as far as the seeds go, and then a couple that have been direct sown into the garden. I use Seed Time, which is a free website that provides you with like a whole entire crop calendar in order to figure out my planting schedule. But it is also important to know where all this stuff is going to go, because we all have lofty goals to grow all of the things, right? But if you have limited space like I do, it can be kind of tricky to figure out where to put it. So you will need to consider the sun and water needs for those crops whenever you're figuring out where you're going to put your stuff. You also need to consider the size of the mature plant. So like a pepper plant, like those guys in the front of that raised bed right there, don't take up nearly as much room as the okra plant, which is the tall leafy guys that look kind of like trees behind them. So keep that in mind whenever you're figuring out where your stuff is going to go. You'll also need to determine space needs if you will be succession sowing. So what that means is you're going to plant your first run of carrots, and then a couple of weeks later you're going to plant a second round of carrots, and so on until that carrot season planting time has kind of reached its max point. Most of my fall and winter crops will just be a single run, so I can fill these beds completely up the first time out of the gate and not have to worry about leaving space for the next planting or any continuous plantings after that. You'll also need to consider if you will be preserving your harvest or eating completely fresh. For me, we will be mostly eating fresh, and I may ferment and pickle some of the root vegetables just to, based on how much I'm able to harvest and grow successfully. If you are wanting to preserve, then you may consider succession planting. That way you can also eat fresh if you wish to. Now, normally all of my raised beds have a whole bunch of different types of crops in them, like this one right here that you see right here. It has peppers, it has okra, it has basil, it has marigolds. There's also a squash plant, and I think I planted a cucumber seed in that one as well. So I really love to have full, diverse growing spaces with a lot of different type of crops. However, this year I'm going to be making some changes to the two beds that are along the fence. So I am going to need to follow a little bit more of a monoculture for those beds, which we'll talk about here very shortly, for a few months until I get those changes made to those beds. So let's go ahead and go out into the garden and talk about where I'm planting my stuff this year. Okay, so these three raised beds behind me, these are my tomato patch during the spring and summer growing season. This is where I typically plant my tomatoes and any companion plants that I plant within them. Like you can see the giant basil there, and some marigolds and some cowpeas kind of planted throughout there. So what's going to be going in these beds is going to basically be my brassica leafy type crops and my carrots. So in this bed that is closest to the house, along the very back is where I'm actually going to be planting my Brussels sprouts. Now these typically take the longest in order in terms of days to harvest. So once I get them transplanted out, then that day count starts, and it's like 110 days before I can harvest those Brussels sprouts. And it is 100,000 degrees outside this time of year. So I figured that putting them in the spot that's going to be under the shade cloth the entire day is going to be the best bet in order to protect them from going straight to seed and or flower, and hopefully getting a harvest of Brussels sprouts off of them this year. In the front row of this bed, I'm going to be planting my collard greens. Now, collard greens grow very easily here in North Texas. They do not too badly in the heat, and then as the weather cools down and we start to get those morning frosts and things, the leaves of the collard greens become much sweeter and they're pretty prolific. So I figure, there's an ant crawling on my phone, so I'm sorry. Okay, so I figure that just in case those Brussels sprouts maybe don't do as well as I want them to, at least those collard greens will. Now, I am also going to be planting carrots down the very middle of that bed. So I think the variety that's going to go in there is probably the dragon carrots, which are orange on the inside and kind of purple on the outside. Really cool looking. So pretty excited about that. And then this middle bed here that still has whatever remaining tomatoes I have left, that is where the broccoli, cauliflower, and bok choy are going to go. So I have a traditional Waltham variety of broccoli. I have a early purple sprouting broccoli, which I had originally direct sowed in this bed right here, but none of them sprouted. So I have some inside that will go here, and then Rober cauliflower, and then I have a Chinese variety of broccoli that I'm starting this week that will also be transplanted into here. Now, they are going to go along this edge here, because that edge really only has some peas growing, which don't take up a whole ton of space. So I will plant those broccolis and cauliflowers along the back here, and then in between some of these tomato plants. And then once the tomatoes start to die off, then that will give more space to those broccoli and cauliflowers. Bok choy and carrots are also going to be planted in this bed, and I'm just going to kind of fit those wherever I have space between the broccolis and the cauliflowers. Then this very front bed here, the one that is getting the most light at the moment, is actually the one that's going to be planted with the fall and winter crops last, because it is getting the most sunlight. I don't want these cold weather crops to immediately go to seed on me, so I am just going to hold off on planting anything in there until it cools down quite a bit. So what's going to go in this bed is actually Chinese cabbage, my kales, and my spinaches, and then carrots again are going to go down the middle. I have several varieties of carrots, and then they have 3 different planting dates. So the very first one that gets planted is going to go in that back bed. The second one that gets planted, the second set that gets planted is going to go in the middle, and then the third set that gets planted is going to go in this one. That way I can kind of harvest in phases as well. Once you plant your carrots, even if it's the dead of winter, as long as you have some pretty thick mulch over them, you'll be quite all right in order to harvest and use them in the winter time. They will actually taste much sweeter compared to if you had carrots that maybe might grow in the summer. So I'm really excited to actually getting to harvest some carrots this year. We have harvested a few over the last couple, but now that they're going to be in the raised beds, I'm excited to see how they do. So now let's talk about these raised beds that are along this fence. These are going to have quite a bit of changes that are going to take place. So as they sit currently, they're just 2 straight beds, 2.5 foot deep, and I think they're 9 feet long. So my husband doesn't want the cucumber vines to grow out into the yard anymore because it makes it a little bit difficult to mow. I have to come out and kind of wind them back up into the bed and then come back out after everybody has finished mowing and weed eating and stuff, and then put them back out into the yard. And it does look a little messy and chaotic. So he asked me if we could put a trellis between the 2 beds right here. And as it sits right now, they're not wide enough for the Vigo Garden arch trellis to connect to them. They have to have a flat piece in between see if I can point this out. They have to have a flat piece in between the round pieces right here. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to buy the extension kit for both beds. The extension kit comes with 2 flat pieces that are 2 foot long, and then the additional bracing to sort of help stabilize the bed. And I'm going to get it in the 4 foot depth. So what's going to happen is there is a short piece on each of the sides that I'm actually going to move to the ends here to make these ends 4 foot deep, and that's going to happen on both beds. And then I'm probably going to have to like adjust the space between them in order for the arch trellis to fit just right. And so what's going to go in here in these beds is going to be the fast growing root crops. So I don't want to put anything that takes 100 bazillion days to come to maturity, because I'm not exactly sure when we're going to be able to get the arch trellis done, but I don't want the plants that are growing in there to be what is holding it up. So the extension panels will replace the short pieces that are 1.5 feet long in the sides. So we're not losing any length of the bed. We're actually making them slightly longer, but they are going to be 1.5 feet deeper, which will give me more square footage in the beds. And then I will have the arch that will connect the 2 beds. Now, the goal is to have that done by next spring. So going to have to empty all the soil out of the beds, take the middle piece out, put the extension piece in, move the middle piece to the ends, connect the arches, connect the arch to both beds. It's going to be quite a bit of work. I'm going to make Jake help me, but the plan is to be able to grow cucumbers on the arch over. I would also like to grow some butterfly peas, the purple pea flowers to use for teas and stuff. And in the fall and spring, be able to grow some sugar snap peas. We don't really eat like the spring peas or anything, but sugar snap peas we like. So what's going to actually be planted in these beds is going to be beets, radishes, turnips, and rutabagas. Now, turnips and rutabagas can take a little while to come to complete maturity, but that's if you wait for them to get incredibly large. You can harvest them smaller and they'll be more tender, and you can use them just fine that way. So I'm thinking that by having the root vegetables in these beds, we can harvest them, you know, whenever we're ready to start working on them. And then if there's still enough season left, I can get some more root veg going in these beds. So in this quad that is between the raised beds, that's still going to remain there. I'm still going to continue to grow food and or flowers and or herbs in the quad. I really like growing in it. When it is performing well, we're able to get a lot of food out of just this like 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot space. So that's really great. So what's going to go in that is actually going to be the kohlrabi. It is fast growing. It's one of those that you can harvest when it's smaller and still use, or you can leave it in to continue to grow and get bigger. Kohlrabi is part of the brassica family, and if you haven't seen it, it's sort of like an alien looking veg. So it has like a bulb type that sits above the ground, and all of the leaves come off of that. We really like to eat it roasted like potatoes, but you can ferment it. You can probably grill it. I mean, you can probably do a whole lot of different things with it. The only way that we've eaten it is roasted, but if I have a good harvest this year, I would like to try fermenting it to see how that turns out. So yes, kohlrabi going here. That way, if we need to harvest it whenever they're kind of small, then we can. It's not that big a deal. Or if it takes a little longer to get going on the arch trellis than we want, then we can continue to let them grow. So over here in the sunflower patch that is in front of the greenhouse, this is going to be any extra kale and collard greens that I have that don't fit in the raised beds that are currently in the tomato patch. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 spaces. So if there's only one plant planted per space, that is 12 additional plants that we can grow in order to feed us. So pretty awesome. Now, the flower bed, I don't typically grow food for consumption in the flower bed. Let me see if I can kind of show you guys. The flower bed is exactly that. It is flowers, but the soil in this bed was really heavy clay whenever I started growing in it. I am in the process of improving it. It has come a long way, but I want to continue to improve the soil in this bed so that the flowers next year and each year thereafter will continue to get healthier and bigger and more beautiful. So I'm going to be planting some winter cover crops in here, fall/winter cover crops in here. So what's going to come in here is going to be crimson clover, and then I have a variety of ruby buckwheat, and that one is not frost hardy, so once it freezes, that's going to die off, but it's going to provide a good nitrogen source back into the soil. Excuse me. I'm also going to plant some mustard greens in here. Now remember, these are not for consumption. This is for improving the soil health. So mustard greens have a really deep taproot, so they're going to drill down and break up that really hard clay. And then I'm also going to be planting some bush beans in here as well, again as a cover crop and not necessarily for consumption. I don't think I have anything else that I could use as a cover crop currently, but I am continuing to do research to see what else I can put in here that will improve that icky, nasty clay soil that, you know, don't necessarily grow flowers or anything else very well. So that's the plan for the flower bed. Now this green stalk right here, it is a hodgepodge. It's going to remain a hodgepodge of things. Right now it currently has mint, basil, thyme, okra. There's some super hot peppers on the back side. I think that might be all of the different things that are in it. This is going to have some cooler weather herbs put in some of the pockets. So I'm going to be growing some dill, some parsley, cilantro, and then I'm also going to put some chives in here because I would like to be able to have some chives to use in different things. So as some of this stuff comes out, like the basil is going to come out, the okra is going to come out eventually, then those cooler weather herbs will go in, replace those. The other 3 green stalks will just kind of rest and reset. I will fertilize them heavily and keep them watered over the winter so the soil stays nice and healthy for the next spring/summer growing. Now that one has strawberries in it, so I'm just going to overwinter the strawberries in there, keep them fertilized, keep them watered, and hopefully keep them going. So they are starting to put off runners a bit, so I'm just kind of moving them into the neighboring pockets to kind of help spread those strawberries out. So we'll see what we get next year for strawberries. That is basically the gist of everything that I'm growing in the fall and winter garden this year. But I did kind of want to very briefly discuss some of the crops that I'm not growing this year and kind of give reasons why. Traditional cabbage. So think of this as the cabbage that you use for like coleslaws or your New Year's cabbage for money or health or whatever it represents. I am not sure why I did not put it on my seed time calendar for this year. I cannot remember and I didn't write it down. So I may change my mind. If I haven't missed the seed starting window, I do have a variety indoors that I could start if I'm still within the time and get it transplanted out somewhere in the garden. Lettuces. So I prefer to grow these in the early spring, and the reason why is because into spring, that's whenever I like to start eating a lot lighter meals and more salads and stuff. During the winter, I don't eat as many salads. I like to eat heavier things to kind of help keep me warmer, you know. So I tend to grow all my lettuces at the end of February into March, and possibly April, depending upon the temperature. That way I have all my fresh greens for my salads whenever I need them. For arugula, we don't grow this because we just don't like it that much. For as little as we eat it, it doesn't really make sense for us to grow it. For the time and effort and all of those things it takes for me to grow it, for the maybe one time a year that we eat it, it's just not worth it. I'll just go buy it. And sometimes that's the trade-off that you have to do. If it is not worth your time and effort to grow something that you don't eat very often, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, it might be better if you go ahead and buy it at the store. I hate saying that because I want to grow everything, but it just doesn't make sense in this small space to grow something that we just don't eat that often. Swiss chard, it grows really easy here. I have grown it successfully and it will perennialize in North Texas. So once you plant it, you can just leave it forever. But I haven't found a way to prepare it that we like eating it. So if you know how to prepare it in a way that doesn't taste like the lawn, then please let me know, so I can go ahead and incorporate that into my garden and see if it's something that's worth keeping around. And then the last thing is sugar snap peas. We love these for stir fries and snacks, but I don't have that trellis system yet, so it doesn't make sense for us to grow them. I do have a bush variety that maybe I might consider, but for right now, until I get the trellis built, I can't really consider the sugar snap peas. That is all I have for this video. Really, I just wanted to walk through and kind of point out where things are growing. If I didn't say where the spinach is going, it's going in the front bed of the tomato patch. I know I went through it really fast, so I couldn't remember if I said it or not. But if you liked this video and you want to see how this fall and winter garden progresses and you know where all of the things are going, then feel free to like and comment and subscribe and do all those YouTube-y things. But until next time, go find a way to get those garden manicures. Bye.